Hi, Fourth Hour. Sorry I couldn't be there today. I'm at a conference called McCall, and it's for technology, so I thought I would try something new with technology and make a video for you guys, just so you're totally clear about what you need to do for today and what is due on Monday. So we've been doing a lot with analyzing poetry, but I thought that we would start writing our own poetry as well. And a great place to start is found poetry. Found poetry is really cool because it lets you be creative, but it's a nice place to start because you're actually using another person's words. So if I were to tell you what found poetry is, I thought that the NewYorkTimes.com had a really good description. You might be asking, why would the New York Times have a description of found poetry? Well, the newspaper actually in the past has had a found poetry contest. So here's the thing, I'm hoping they're going to do the found poetry contest again, and if they do, I would actually like you guys to submit to this contest. So not only are we writing this poem for fun and for a class, but potentially you could be winning something as well, which is pretty cool. So, the NewYorkTimes.com says, a good nutshell description would be poems that are composed from words and phrases found in another text. That's right there. A New York Times found poem then uses words and phrases taken from one Times article, past or present, or several. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Let me show you two examples first. I'm also going to go through the directions, and then you're going to get to work on doing your own. So the first thing I'll do actually before I even read this to you right here is I'll go through the directions. So the first thing you are going to do is you're going to select an article, and I'll let you do this in a few minutes, but first, after you've selected it, you're going to read the article you've selected looking for 20 to 30 words or phrases that stand out. Underline anything you find particularly descriptive, powerful, or interesting. Remember, your poem can be no longer than 14 lines. I give you that rule because that's a New York Times rule. Number 2, on the back side of this page, make a list of details, words, and phrases you underlined. Keep them in order. So this is you annotating, but you're annotating for a really specific reason. You're taking words out of the article that are really interesting to you, that you think you can use in your own poem. 3. Look back over your list and cut out anything that's dull, unnecessary, or just doesn't seem right for a poem. So you're taking that list and you're paring it down to the best words possible that'll fit into a piece of poetry. Number 4, on a separate sheet of paper, arrange your words into a poem. Try to keep the words and phrases in order. You don't necessarily have to, but a lot of the times keeping them in order makes more sense. 5. Make any minor changes necessary to create your poem. You can change punctuation and change the words to make them fit together. So you can change the tense of a verb. You can change something into a possessive or a plural noun. And you can also change capitalization. Any of those are fine. Number 6, if you absolutely need to add a word to make the poem flow more smoothly, to make sense, or to make a point, you may add up to 2 words of your own. Okay, so I know I made a mistake here. It says 3, 2, and only 3, 2 words of your own. Okay, and you will be disqualified if you use more, so make sure you only use 2 words of your own. Number 7, space or arrange the words. Pay attention to line breaks, layout, rhythm, and other elements that will emphasize important words or significant ideas in your poem. You can also put key words on lines by themselves. This is really, really important because the words on the page are prose, so you are going to space them out so they are poetry and look more like poetry, and line breaks are really important with that. I'll show you what one person did that actually won the contest, and then I'll show you what I did in a moment. Lastly, you'll give your poem a title. That does not have to be a word from the article or words from the article. And then 9, when your poem is complete, go through and annotate it, explaining why you made the choices that you did. I'm going to show you my example later. But first, let's look at an example that won. On the first page, you'll see on the left-hand side, there's this nice article or really it's a front page of a paper from 1941. Take a look at the headline: U.S. declares war, Pacific battle widens, Manila area bombed, 1,500 dead in Hawaii, hostile planes sighted at San Francisco. I think this is really cool. This is a historical newspaper. So you could do a historical newspaper if you wanted to, but that would take some outside research. I've printed out some articles for you to pick from once we have time to do this in class in a few minutes. But this person picked this front page. Now, the person read and scoured this article following these directions. So first, the person kept a list of the details, words and phrases, looked back over it, and cut things out, arranged the words into a poem, gave it a title, and this is what it looks like. Actually, I don't see the title, but regardless, I think it's a pretty cool poem. It was a war of nerves, a constant fighting force, with long lines of fighting men ready for war. On the outskirts of morning came the warden's war. Conflicting men dead, casualties were spread. Now the city's fumed, the ports pathetically silent, deprived of warships. The allies of justice and tolerance have won. Now done with war. So I think it's pretty awesome that this person is able to create a poem that makes sense out of what you could think are random words and lines from the New York Times front page. That's neat to me. Now, obviously, the headline for this day is about war. It makes sense that the subject of this particular poem is about war, but when you're writing your own, don't think that it has to be the same subject as the article itself. Sometimes it will be different. Let me show you mine. So here's the article I picked. It's actually from 2013, and it's called "The Average American Knows How Many People" by Andrew Gelman. And let me start reading this. The average American knows about 600 people. How do we know this? Research is led by my Columbia colleague, Tian Zhang, posed a series of questions to a representative sample of 1,500 Americans. How many people do you know named Kevin? How many people named Karen? How many named Sean, Brenda, Keith, or Rachel? After adjusting for various factors, for example, the names are not evenly distributed in age across the population, we determined that participants knew an average of 8.4 people with those names. Social Security records suggest that 1.4% of the population has one of the names, and 8.4 divided by 1.4% is 600 people. Using this clever method of estimating social networks can be tricky. Indeed, the method's inventors, H. Russell Bernard and Peter Kilworth, estimated from an earlier survey that the average American knew only 290 people. Why was their estimate so low? Perhaps because the names they used were common ones like Michael and Robert. Research shows that people with common names are harder to recall than those with slightly more exotic ones like Sean and Rachel. Our team also estimates that most Americans know just 10 to 25 people well enough to say they trust them. Okay, so I have to say it's a pretty cool article, but as I was going through this, something stood out to me. I like the words average American. Something else that stood out to me are these names that are used in the article. I thought to myself, could I do something with those names? So I wrote all these words down on a separate sheet of paper. I arranged them and I made line breaks in a few different places. And let me show you what I came up with. I actually titled it The Average American. I told you I was drawn to that. The Average American. Kevin, Karen, Keith. The Average American, posed, adjusting, not even, only, common. Okay, now you'll see the last thing that I'm having you do with this poem is provide annotations. So let me tell you about how I wrote this and why I wrote it this way. For this first, or the title rather here, I said this. I like this phrase in the article. When I read it, it made me think about who the average American really is. I decided to explore this in my poem. I just thought it was a cool idea. Next, I annotated my first line here with the names, right? This article provided a lot of examples of names. I was intrigued by this. These stuck out to me because they are alliterative, meaning they start with the same consonant sound, right? I decided to have them stand on their own in separate lines because it looked like a list. On a metaphorical level, I suppose you could also say that these people do stand alone, isolated. I then annotated the next stanza. After creating the first stanza, I knew that I wanted to create a stanza to balance and qualify the first. Who really are these people? Then I talk about the actual construction of the second stanza itself. The single word lines of the stanza balance the names in the first. It's interesting. Upon first writing it, I didn't even notice that I had added the commas. It's not like the first stanza. I suppose this makes sense, since it's a description of those people and not necessarily a list. I also wanted to convey that Kevin, Karen, and Keith, or any American, are all of these things. Each word doesn't correspond to only one person. Okay, so check it out. Up here, I do not have commas, but down here, I do. So the last word here, common, stands on its own because it's a bit of a letdown, yet suggests a sense of finality. We don't want to be common, yet aren't we all? By the very definition of the word average, we are. The space before the word suggests a moment of pause before the reader or speaker reaches this conclusion. So here's mine. Alright, so flipping back to the directions, now you're going to get to do your own. So up in the front of the classroom, I want you to take a few things. First of all, I want you to look at the articles, and I want you to pick one. Which one stands out to you? Which one seems interesting to you? If it turns out that you really don't like it, you can go ahead and trade it for another one. But take it, read it, annotate it, pick out words. When you're up there, also pick out one of these sheets, one of these direction sheets. Eventually, you're going to put this in your poetry portfolio, and of course, when this video is done, you're going to need it to refer back to the directions. So you have the rest of the hour to work on this. I expect that you are going to have a draft in class on Monday. It can be handwritten, but it could also be typed. I do want annotations though. So if I were you and I knew that eventually I was going to have to turn in a final copy of my poem, maybe I'd type it and I'd annotate it that way. That way when I make edits, I can just go back and edit that document instead of having to type all my poems out at the end, because by the way, we will be writing quite a few poems in class. Good luck, and I will see you on Monday with a poem, and make sure it's annotated, right? And as long as you followed all the directions, and as long as you are willing to share it with someone, on Monday, you're going to get full credit for doing it. Have a great weekend.